Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Influence Gap. Of course, I'm Crystal Golightly. I'm joined with my fantastic co host, Nathan Herman. And I am so happy to introduce one of my friends from college. We've known each other for more years than we have fingers, Nicole Uribe. And Nicole, I'm going to let her introduce herself, but she and I really bonded because we thought we were going to be attorneys one day a long, long time ago when we met in
I
front of our
also thought
college.
I was gonna be an attorney. I think that's a normal phase of development, Steph. I
Right?
empathize.
And then we realized we'd have to do homework for the rest of our lives, and was like at any rate, and then AI happened, and so now we're doing different kind of homework. Anyways, Nicole has been in the privacy space for pretty much your whole career, right?
Yeah, it's been a very long time.
Right. So with that, please feel free to give us a quick rundown of who you are, what you're interested in, and what you've been doing all these years.
My goodness. Well, hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. As Crystal mentioned, work in the privacy industry. I've been in this industry for well over a decade, even longer than that. And I've been very fortunate to see how privacy has evolved globally over this time span. Obviously, being something that was kind of low level, but in the background in certain countries. And then hitting the spotlight, say a good 7 years ago, and it just keeps on running and flowing into different industries across the world and obviously in corporate America. Now we're seeing this expansion into AI, and so I get to toggle a bit into that space as well, which is really exciting.
So I think I'm gonna maybe ramble for a second and then ask you a question. People listening to this are like, why are you interviewing somebody who focuses on privacy? Don't you want this to be about influence and marketing and analyst relations and influence relationships? All the things. Yes, but also when we think about influence, AI is on the tip of everyone's tongue, right? There's stats from Forrester, from Gartner, from other research houses. More and more people are interacting with AI as their first choice platform, or maybe their only choice platform. It has upended the way people buy, specifically from an enterprise perspective, but also from a consumer perspective. I think privacy and data governance and the proliferation of AI and how that plays into the influence economy, these things are all related. So I guess I'd love to get any thoughts you have on why somebody listening to this for a focus on influence might also want to hear about what's going on in the privacy world as it relates to these AI models.
Absolutely. I think when we think about AI, there's kind of two worlds to it. There's the really excited group of individuals who are very much pro AI, let's throw it at everything. And then there's the other group of individuals who are a bit more concerned, if you will, and they are very much worried about the future state of where are our jobs going to be and how does AI influence or connect to the different facets of my life as a consumer. Where my role plays within that is what we would think of as like responsible AI.
Hmm.
And part of responsible AI is taking in these governance frameworks that are drawn from privacy and building those frameworks into AI, such that when companies are building out their AI products, they're doing it in a responsible way that takes into account not only selling to the consumer, but using a responsible method to be a value asset when selling to the consumer, to make the consumer feel more comfortable about engaging with AI, leveraging it for its best benefits, while also knowing that it's not going to, at the end of the day, negatively harm the consumer.
Yeah, I think that's the part that interests me the most. You hit on the dichotomy. We have kind of two big groups and a bunch of people in the middle right now. On one hand, we have the fast adopters, the early adopters, AI now, AI everywhere, AI everything, and we're getting into conversations around copyright law when it comes to that, right? And then we have on the flip side Let's keep the AI out of everything we do. Let's retain what is uniquely human. This is bad. Skynet is a thing. We've seen it in 3 Terminator movies, more than that, but we don't have to talk about them. And then people that are in the middle, right, that feel more measured, which is probably where I'm at. I mean, obviously, I use it from a professional perspective. I think everyone in the enterprise space does, but I also do get some of the heartburn. So it's very fascinating.
Oh, yeah, we're living in some crazy times right now, and quite fortunate to be able to see this transition, I think.
So go ahead.
Oh, no, after you.
No, I was going to say, so because you have been in the privacy space for, more than a decade, and the conversation around generative AI is really only a handful of years old, 3, 4. What do you think has been the biggest sea change? You kind of hit on the changing privacy landscape. Obviously, Europe has been leading with GDPR for a long time, and that is going to play into AI. But yeah, what's been the biggest change in the enterprise and consumer space? Go ahead, Crystal.
GDPR, when you had said 7 years ago, and I was like, "Bing, bing, bing," there was, like, GDPR, and the California did a similar act shortly thereafter, and I was like, "There is the dividing line,"
Yeah.
I'm sure in your career even.
Yeah, I've been in big tech for quite some time now, and GDPR was a game changer. It really forced companies to think about responsibility and accountability. That was the main driver, in my opinion, with GDPR. Now, also in the coming out of the EU is the EU AI Act, which is similarly a big driver for a responsible application of AI into our products that are sold to consumers. So those two are quite heavy hitters, particularly when you think about AI and privacy, where the EU is kind of leading the industry in terms of responsibility and accountability. But Crystal, as you mentioned, with CCPA coming out of California, gold standard GDPR, CCPA coming right after it, and then you're seeing this proliferation of many other privacy and AI legislation coming out of various countries internationally to meet that same standard, if not alter it a little bit for their individuals.
So, Nicole, it's interesting that you brought up, you talked about Europe being gold standard and then California coming right up under it. We have a number of analysts that are in Europe, and sometimes we'll have conversations about like sort of the AI race and the different countries that are really pushing things forward. And then they go, and what about Europe? Right. And that's largely because they're thinking about themselves in sort of this change. And it's like some people want to say that GDPR and some of the cautionary policies in Europe actually holds Europe back. But then you say immediately after, California also has this protectionist view as well, but also like leading a lot of things. So it really doesn't have the regulation doesn't really have to be like holding you back.
Absolutely not. That was the one of the most common fears after, the drafts of GDPR came out was, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to business in the EU? Is it going to drain their economy? And it absolutely did not. I mean, we still see businesses growing out of the EU. We see obviously big tech is born and continues to grow out of California. It's a understandable concern or fear, but it really hasn't stopped business from wanting to engage in these areas that have these regulatory protections.
So I guess maybe a practical question, if we focus on analyst relations specifically. So we were talking offline. Obviously, in the world of analyst relations, you have vendors on one side, you have research firms on the other, and then on the opposite side of that, you have the end user. Research firms acting as kind of the middle ground, the evaluation mechanism. We see that every single analyst firm, without fail, is coming out with their own AI models to simplify the research process, to simplify the ingesting of vendor documentation, vendor questionnaires, vendor RFIs. And so they're building these massive data repositories with the vision of simplifying in the future and now. That's not unique to analyst firms. I think every industry is doing that, right? I imagine similar things are happening on the sales side. How does this all like jive together when we think about, again, I'm thinking about this in the terms of influence, like how much do I want to give to a company of my data to train their models? This is a conversation that affects everyone in every field right now, I'm sure. So I should be interested in getting your thoughts.
It's actually a good segue when you think about privacy and influence and AI because when we think about my data, right, that is a kind of a primarily or a predominant privacy concern is what's happening to my data. Do I get a choice as to who my data is shared with and how it is used? Right. And then you think about AI as like the user or the processor. When I think about influence and how we're using that data to help at the end of the day the business and or the consumer, right? As you gave examples of creating these vendor workflows to make them more efficient. We're also creating, SOX 2 forms, for example, to make it
Mm,
easier to fill it out. Those types of enablements are made possible because we have certain measures that allow us to use information in a responsible way, but also in a way that drives business to be way more efficient. So I think it's actually quite fantastic when it's intentionally thought through of what information do we actually need? How can we use this information? And then the execution component comes later. So it's really all about the planning stage, in my opinion, on how we're using, collecting it, and processing it.
yeah. And I could see how that could be a challenge in the current climate too, because we are focused on moving fast.
Mhm.
But if I'm hearing you, the most important piece of any AI rollout, no matter your industry, no matter what you're doing, is making sure you have the foundations right, and not even just the architectural foundations, but the what do we need, why do we need it, what are we going to use it for?
Yep. Those are predominant, like foundational questions or principles rather from a privacy perspective. And it also helps the business to save money by knowing what you're going to do before you do it rather than jumping in, doing something, and then realizing you've got this kind of messy flurry of data that's everywhere and you don't know what you're doing.
Really not thinking about AI as like an operational gain, but thinking of it as an infrastructure, right?
Exactly.
Does the different type of model come into play too? Obviously, we hear large language models all the time, which are these massive constructs that are trained on anything and everything. But there's also a push in a lot of industries, networking being one of them, to build small language models, very specialized, very concentrated AI tools that are really good at managing a network by themselves. They don't need to be able to give you the entire compendium of human history. Like, I wonder if how that is coming into play and if you're seeing any kind of changes from both a momentum standpoint and a privacy standpoint with those.
From a momentum standpoint, I'm starting to see that kind of become the trend of going from large language to smaller because people want to be more focused or businesses want to be more focused on what they're using, why they're using it. They have the guardrails around that data to be very intentional about what the end result should look like rather than kind of or rather it's culling through the noise, if you will.
Let's talk about how you think about influence in a new age. Like, how are you being influenced as a consumer of things and stuff? Because I think that's important.
Okay,
So,
kick it off.
so we've had a wide ranging conversation about privacy and data, and some people listening are probably thinking Crystal and Nathan are way over their skis, which is probably true and fair. So, I think one thing I'd be curious to get your perspective on, Nicole, is when you think about influence, you as a person, you as the professional, you as the business person, how are you being influenced? How do you think about influence? How does AI play into that? What other channels play into that? How do you think about your own influence internally within your organization?
Think about that because Nathan, I want to say something to you because I finally could see you. Of course we're over our skis. We brought someone in to teach us. That's part of this whole thing for us is, like, influence us and talk about influence. So, anyways, had to give that little nod there.
I love it. When I think about influence in my day to day, especially in the business, it's not quite so different, right? When we think about it from a theoretical perspective of we're working with different parties day to day, whether you're going to the grocery store and you're trying to achieve a, get in, get out, or you're working with your business partners and you all have kind of the same goal, but from different perspectives. So, how do we influence one another to get to that end goal? Or how do we remove blockers so that we can get out or, whatever your end goal is there? So, when I think about influence in my day to day, it's really about understanding what the end goal is and figuring out what the motivations are from others such that we can align on those shared end goals or motivations to achieve ultimately whatever that big, gold star is. In the privacy and AI world, there's a lot of complexities. Obviously, there's different perspectives, but at the end of the day, we're trying to ship something. We're trying to get something out the door that our businesses needs, mitigates risk such that the business isn't taking on an inordinate amount of risk. But also, we want that product to be beneficial for the business and importantly for the consumer.
It sounds messy, right? Because essentially what your team is doing is interpreting the law or the regulation, and trying to figure out where do you live in there.
Exactly. I mean, many companies, especially the larger ones, have great relationships with regulators to understand their perspectives beyond just the black and white, literature. What we're able to do, even from a smaller business perspective, is look to the larger businesses who already have those relationships, see what the larger businesses are doing, how they're implementing things, and then follow along. Right? So there's a little bit of riding the coattails of others, but then there's also managing your relationships with the individuals who have, some measure of power or influence on companies, uh, for better or worse.
I wouldn't even say riding coattails. I would probably say it's validating a thesis based off of precedent, right? Or what others are doing. And so much of the law and regulation is about what is this underlying belief system or understanding of what is being told to the general public of what to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of legal jargon to course through, and there are fantastic attorneys who are able to interpret the law. And part of my role is kind of that juxtaposition between the legal teams and the engineering teams, such that they can speak the same language and we can all kind of move together in the same direction.
Wow. Right. So you're basically like helping the world move forward in this AI era in a lot of ways.
I think that's a great way to put it. Thank you.
Like the human side of it.
Right. Right.
It's interesting because, part of this show I think is also about the human, right? And I love the fact that you're in between two kind of competing worlds and trying to help bring them together. And I also like that you frame it up as what are people trying to accomplish? Because those are also like inherently human.
Exactly.
I think one thing I'd be curious to get your opinion on, since you do live in this world, everything is getting noisier. When I think about things from a marketing perspective, there are almost an infinite amount of people that sound really smart and can say the thing I need them to say, but don't actually have influence because they don't actually say something that makes somebody buy a piece of software, buy a piece of hardware, or buy, a software suite. How how's this going to evolve? It's not hard with AI to sound really, really smart. So how do I, like, as we look ahead, as we project out, How do I deal with that? I'd be interested if you can apply any of your frameworks as you think about trust and privacy to that kind of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, particularly from a marketing perspective, trust is very important, but I wouldn't necessarily equate intelligence with trust because there's something that's inherently human, which is that warmth or that charisma that comes through with certain marketing strategies that will never be replaced with AI, in my opinion. I think that's something that is uniquely human. And while the human can come through and or an AI bot can mimic and say beautiful prose, at the end of the day, do we trust what we're seeing, what we're buying because of what we're hearing or what we're feeling? And I feel like with marketing, it's about emoting or getting the consumer to feel something.
Right. Nathan, I think we talked one time about how do we signal to people on things that we post on LinkedIn that we're human,
Yeah.
like leaving grammatical errors or inaccurate, I don't know, spellings or punctuation problems, right? Because an AI would never do that at the very basic level.
Unless I tell it to.
That would
Right.
be interesting test.
You
Make
can
my
actually.
LinkedIn profile sound more human. I would be curious to see what that would look like.
You can prompt it to do some of that, but it's off. Like, there's so much context in our humanity. Like, sometimes I'll just brain dump things into my favorite AI of the moment, and it gets pretty close. Although, Nathan, I told you that Gemini told me that I was what was it? Like, approachable bougie or something?
Mhm. Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, whatever." But yeah, there is something that's inherently human, and I think that we've all, in a very short time, been able to clearly identify when something is not. Um,
I don't
and
know. I mean, I think maybe us in this room, but when I scroll through LinkedIn, I feel like 95 of what I'm reading is clearly AI generated, and that's an overgeneralization. It's not 95%, but I think this is the next major frontier when it comes to literacy. I really don't think most people can distinguish AI from not AI, and furthermore, I don't think a lot of people care. And that's what scares me. That's why I'm gonna go into an existential crisis after we hang up. Like, I just think that I just don't know. I don't know, Crystal. I don't know if I buy that.
you know what? I think you have something really valid there because I think that probably the 3 of us and most of the people that we know, we live in a different world than a general population because we work in tech, we have access to information that is not easily accessible. You have to either think in a certain way or have access to people or read a thousand other things. It's really hard to forget that like those of us that do work in tech, just generally speaking, we live in a almost a parallel universe because we see all of these things before anyone.
Yeah, our exposure is definitely unique. It feels like a bubble.
It totally is a bubble.
I still fall for AI videos. I'll admit it. So
I do all the
The
time.
video Yeah, the videos sometimes unless it's, like, a cat doing something unnatural. That's a little, shout out to Joe Peterson, who's an analyst who does cat videos with frequency to explain very complex technology things.
Fun.
So, yeah, so tell us about Nicole as a human being, like how does your role impact your decision making and what you let influence you now? Do you find yourself to be a little more skeptical, like as you're doom scrolling at 8 o'clock at night? Or like you said, do you fall for it? Or, do you take the $5 coupon and sell your privacy of all the different things that you want to buy?
Well, actually, that's a great question. To the first part about, do I recognize AI? Does it matter when I'm doom scrolling? I actually appreciate, AI videos for what they are, right? If it's bringing me joy, I accept it. I don't want to dive too deep and be too critical about, oh, this is fake. I can't believe it. But more so, oh, this is really funny. I love a good cat video. And the fact that AI was able to make me laugh, amazing. Love it. But when I think about, do I want to share my information such that it can be used for other purposes that I may not be aware of? I'm probably not going to consent. I'm probably not going to check the box and opt in. Or conversely, on a website, I may check the box to opt out of sharing my information such that, I may not want to be tracked for this particular type of website, right? Or their third party vendors.
Yeah, me too, actually. I opt out of a lot of things because I'm like, "Don't you have enough on me already?
Yeah,
You've been tracking me since I was 20 years old because we were too silly to know any better back then." Although, who knows if that's still all that stuff is even still on a server somewhere.
it is.
Okay. Oh my gosh, how funny. I feel like I'm doing too much talking, Nathan.
No, I talked a bunch in the middle segment.
Right. Where my video is acting strange. So we like to kind of talk about things in segments, right? So as we're getting into this like final sort of section of our chat here, we always like to talk about the future. Like, what are you expecting? Do you think there's going to be I don't know. Obviously, there's going to be more AI, but like also, I hear that the younger generation underneath us, probably some of our cohort's children, are kind of revolting against technology. So, what are you thinking about the future of AI and influence and privacy?
Ooh, I have a little bit of a dark perspective.
Okay.
Bring it.
What I'm seeing trend wise in the near future is excellent at doing entry level and mid tier work. And so for the future workers, I think it's going to be really hard to break into industries that used to have entry level jobs because we have a very efficient, very inexpensive way of replacing those jobs, which that you need higher mid-tier to expert level employees for those nuanced cases or nuanced events that require that level of specialty, which means that for many individuals who are coming out of school, I think we're going to see a greater concentration of specialties, maybe a little bit more schooling, or a change to our educational system such that it's less about generalization and more about specialization to give youth an opportunity to join the workforce and not be kind of in this weird middle ground that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that's right. I've actually heard a number of large companies being very intentional about hiring entry level folks, and they'll do I heard some executives talking about how they would do kind of contests to see who would get the entry level position, and someone said, "Yeah, we have that too. It's called internships," which was kind of a really funny funny thing. It's like, yes, but I did appreciate that at the executive level that decision makers are saying like, "Hey, we have to evaluate and create programs for feeder systems, right? To build the next generation of leaders." So,
Absolutely. And that's something you can think about from an influential perspective as well is like, how do businesses want to potentially influence the educational system? How do businesses want to prepare the next level of individuals to be specialists for their companies as opposed to kind of what we have right now, which is largely you take what you get.
Man, there's a lot to unpack here with privacy. How did you end up here, Nicole? Like, let's take it back to that. Like, how did you end up in the privacy world? Was it like, this is a good place to start before I go to law school? I just can't remember. And this for your career?
Yeah, no, it was kismet.
A little girlfriend hour for a second.
Actually, I was very fortunate. So I was living in San Diego and needed a job. Found a job basically leveraging my experience in the legal field. I was a litigation technologist prior to joining privacy, and my mentor slash very close friend took me under her wing, taught me everything that she knew at the time, way back then, and it kind of just I took to it. I felt like I finally found my place thanks to her, and then, just kept growing and finding more and more mentors from there.
And that's how we wrap it back to influence, right? And the human factor of what really became a defining moment for you.
It absolutely was. It absolutely was. Because prior to that, I was like, do I want to be a civil rights attorney? What kind of attorney do I want to be? Do I want to go into this field or that field? But you know how it is when you get out of school. It's a little bit like, oh my gosh, there's so many options versus before, your path was very defined when you're going through schooling.
Yeah. And then there's a whole other part of you that's like, do I want to go back to school?
Yeah.
Be a lifelong student if I could.
Yeah. But then there's things like called bills,
I said if I
mortgage,
could.
right? Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been really interesting. Nathan, do you have any other questions for Nicole?
No, this has been a
No.
fantastic conversation.
Lovely.
Totally. So much to think about and so very timely. Mm, Thank you, Nicole, for spending some time with us. I would love to know how other people are thinking about this privacy conversation. And I hope that people have deeper respect for their privacy teams and the role that you play in making sure that companies are doing the right things, not only for our corporate objectives, but also for us humans. So that's it for another episode of The Influence Gap. Thank you again, Nicole.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Likewise.
Bye.